In Washington tonight, a constitutional fault line widens, quietly, dramatically, and in full public view. What began as a routine political disagreement has escalated into something far more consequential. A sitting president of the United States accusing members of Congress, 6 Democrats, all former military or intelligence officials, of treason, a crime punishable by death under federal law. The trigger? A short video reminding U.S. service members of a long-standing principle, that illegal orders must be refused. What followed was an explosion across the political landscape, sharp posts on Truth Social, accusations of sedition, warnings of violence, and a rush to increase security on Capitol Hill. Tonight, the nation faces a question it has not confronted in a generation. Where is the line between political rhetoric and a threat? In this documentary, we break down what happened, what the law says, what the Constitution protects, and why military orders, lawful and unlawful, sit at the center of one of the most alarming confrontations of the Trump presidency. And at the heart of it all, a debate over loyalty, power, responsibility, and the health of American democracy in a moment of rising tension. This is the story of how a 90-second video ignited one of the most volatile political clashes of the year.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to The Takeout. We did not expect to start tonight with Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We are, because a debate, if you can call it that, broke out today over what it means, and calls by the President of the United States for charges of treason against 6 Democratic members of Congress. Treason, as you might know, is punishable by death. President Trump amplified a Truth Social post calling for the lawmakers' death by hanging. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are. Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice says service personnel must obey lawful orders. Failure to obey lawful orders can result in court-martial. There is, however, an important qualifier. Military personnel have a duty to disobey a manifestly illegal order. That means the order's illegality must be, quote, clear and obvious. Examples: orders to target civilians, orders to falsify documents, orders to commit crimes. 6 Democrats in Congress, all of whom served in the United States military or the U.S. intelligence community, released a video to members of the military and intelligence community, and here, from that video, are the most pertinent excerpts.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
And intelligence community professionals
Against American citizens. Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad, but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
The confrontation begins with a simple but powerful premise. The U.S. military is bound by the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which requires service members to follow lawful orders and reject those that are clearly illegal. This principle is not new. It predates the Trump presidency, predates post-9/11 conflicts, and extends back through the lessons of Nuremberg. Yet in the current political climate, even a reminder of this rule has become combustible. The video released by 6 Democratic lawmakers, each with national security or military backgrounds, was framed as a caution to service members, urging vigilance in a moment they describe as volatile. Their message focused on the dangers of politicizing the military and the legal boundaries of military obedience. But for President Donald Trump, this message represented something very different. The president interpreted the video as a direct suggestion that he, America's commander-in-chief, was issuing illegal orders, or might do so in the future. The suggestion, he argued, was tantamount to sedition. Within hours, the dispute escalated from an argument over constitutional interpretation to calls for execution under federal treason statutes. It is the speed of that escalation that has stunned observers across the political spectrum. In a political era shaped by hyperbole, threats, and outrage, this moment carries a uniquely sharp edge. Because unlike many political confrontations, This one touches the chain of command itself, the structure that governs how military authority flows and how military obedience is enforced. The lawmakers pointed to the long-standing doctrine, illegal orders must be refused. The White House countered with an equally forceful position that to warn service members of such a possibility is itself incitement. And this is where the stakes rise. The U.S. military is one of the most trusted institutions in American public life, in part because it is seen as apolitical. Any perception that senior leaders or elected officials are attempting to leverage the military, whether intentionally or not, immediately raises alarm among policymakers, legal scholars, and former defense officials. At the center of this debate sits a delicate balance, the need to maintain civilian control of the military, while ensuring the military does not become an instrument of unlawful political power. This dispute is not simply about a video. It is about the boundaries of presidential authority, the responsibilities of elected officials, and the fragile trust that underpins democratic governance.
So let's dig into this a bit. In California, the Democratic governor challenged the legality of Trump's National Guard deployments there. For a member of the military, following that order to deploy would be legal. Yes, legal. Why? Because of the order's presumptive legality and that it flowed in the proper chain of command from the chief executive of the United States on down. The lawmakers who put out that video said only illegal orders can be disobeyed. Nevertheless, Trump called the video, quote, seditious behavior at the highest level, unquote, said the lawmakers, quote, should be arrested and put on trial, unquote. And here is the repost calling for the lawmakers to be hanged. House Speaker Mike Johnson, by way of defense of Trump, said the Democrats told troops to, quote, disobey orders, unquote. You can judge that line of defense for yourself. There is, of course, some history here. Trump, many months ago, warned about enemies here at home. He meant Democrats in government. Listen.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries.
President Donald Trump's words often ignite strong reactions, but in this case, the escalation carried immediate operational consequences. Within hours of the president reposting calls for execution by hanging, federal law enforcement agencies initiated protective steps for several Democratic lawmakers. Such a rapid response underscores the seriousness with which these signals are now interpreted. In an era where political violence is not abstract, but lived, recent, and vividly remembered, every phrase from a sitting president is weighed with unprecedented gravity. After January 6th, security officials no longer dismiss rhetoric as symbolic. They examine it for actionable patterns, currents of mobilization, and shifts in online extremist discourse. For the 6 lawmakers at the heart of this confrontation, the threats were not theoretical. Their video did not mention President Trump by name, but addressed a broader principle, the duty to disobey illegal military orders. In a different political climate, the message might have passed as a routine civics lesson. Today, it has become a lightning rod. Supporters of the president argue that his reaction reflects a legitimate concern. If opposition lawmakers imply the commander-in-chief might give illegal orders, then the military's trust could be undermined. In this view, warning soldiers of hypothetical misconduct weakens unity and fosters suspicion at a critical moment. Critics, however, interpret the president's response as dangerously disproportionate. Treason is the most severe crime defined in the Constitution, and its application is intentionally narrow to prevent political misuse. To call for treason charges and amplify post-demanding execution risks normalizing language that historically precedes periods of political persecution. For legal experts, the moment reveals a deeper constitutional tension. How does a democracy preserve robust dissent while preventing rhetoric that could incite violence? And perhaps more urgently, what is the role of the military when civilian leadership and civilian critics clash publicly. Every democracy relies on invisible boundaries, norms that keep political competition within peaceful limits. When rhetoric crosses into criminal framing, labeling opponents as traitors, enemies, or existential threats, those boundaries strain. This is the point where officials across the intelligence community begin to worry, not because of what has happened, but because of what such rhetoric has the potential to activate. It is a reminder that in American politics today, a single post can ripple outward into a national security event, testing the resilience of institutions and the trust that holds them together.
The president and the vice president, for that matter, have accused the other side of encouraging political violence. Isn't that exactly what the president is doing when he says that members of Congress should be killed?
Why aren't you talking about what these members of Congress are doing to encourage and incite violence? They are literally saying to 1.3 million active duty service members not to defy the chain of command, not to follow lawful orders.
Actually, what they said is you can refuse an illegal order.
But they're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not.
If fear is contagious, so is courage. And I think when a lion's share of Americans understand that it is in their own power to push back on this kind of rhetoric and this kind of threat, that's when we actually turn the tide. And I'm not going to shut up because Donald Trump is threatening me.
The central issue in this confrontation is not purely political. It is legal, ethical, and foundational to the functioning of the American military. The debate hinges on a critical question. What makes an order lawful? The Uniform Code of Military Justice places strict limits on presidential power in wartime and peacetime alike. Orders that deliberately target civilians, violate international treaties, or demand falsification of records are unequivocally illegal. Service members are trained extensively and repeatedly, not only to follow orders but to question, challenge, and reject those that cross bright legal lines. This is not defiance. It is discipline. Critically, the message from the 6 lawmakers reflects this established doctrine. No military expert disputes these boundaries. Yet the timing of the video, released in a politically charged moment, raised suspicions among the president's allies. They viewed it as a thinly veiled warning directed personally at President Trump, suggesting a distrust of his leadership. But to many constitutional scholars, the lawmakers' message was less about the president himself and more about reaffirming principles that remain vitally important in moments of political anxiety. Democracies often depend on guardrails that seem invisible until pressure suddenly exposes them. The American military occupies a unique position, powerful yet constrained, loyal to the commander-in-chief, yet committed to the Constitution above any individual. This hierarchy of loyalty is deliberate, designed to prevent the very scenarios the video warns against. However, when elected officials publicly debate the legality of presidential orders, the perception alone can strain that relationship. Soldiers seeing high-level political conflict may feel caught between competing loyalties, one to civilian leadership, the other to constitutional law. This tension is not hypothetical. It has surfaced previously in U.S. history during moments of war, crisis, and political upheaval. What makes this moment different is its immediacy and its visibility. The argument is not contained within congressional hearings or military briefings. It plays out openly on social media, cable news, and live press conferences. And in this environment, every phrase becomes amplified. Every warning becomes politicized. Every suggestion of illegality becomes interpreted as an attack. The challenge for the country is how to preserve trust in the chain of command when political actors publicly question each other's constitutional integrity. It is a delicate balance, one that must be managed carefully to maintain both stability and accountability.
So the White House is holding on to that idea of the suggestion, the implication from this video. Nancy?
That's right. The case that Caroline Leavitt made today is that it isn't the president's speech that is incendiary. It is this video put out by Democrats in which she said that they incentivize the 1.3 million members of the military to disobey the chain of command, something that she said could lead to chaos, even lead to people getting killed. But there was this uproar on Capitol Hill, Major, after the president said that these 6 Democratic lawmakers should be put to death. A lot of Democrats who said that President Trump was putting them at risk, that he has supporters who are unhinged, and that he has just sent a powerful message to them that the Democrats are the enemy and that they deserve to die. The president didn't then repeat his threat, but he didn't delete it either.
And Nancy, this week alone, there is a bit of a backdrop to this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, has said, because she has now since broken with President Trump, or President Trump broke with her, that she has been subjected to greater threats of violence. In Indiana, where the president is unhappy with state lawmakers over their unwillingness to draw new congressional lines there, members of the state Senate have said they've experienced threats and swatting episodes in Indiana. These things are playing out this week. It's a live wire.
Right. And these 6 Democratic lawmakers have now been granted additional security, Major, because they anticipate that there will be a larger volume of threats coming their way. And one Democratic Senator, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, said today, we have kids. And, you know, every lawmaker is now getting on the phone with his or her chief of staff to figure out how we can better protect ourselves this weekend. So, you know, there's already a heightened state of alert. We know that over the past few years that threats to lawmakers have increased exponentially, and they argue that this is just throwing another log on the fire.
From the North Lawn, Nancy Cordes, thank you so very, very much.
In Washington, the intersection between political rhetoric and personal safety has become increasingly fraught. What once might have been dismissed as partisan hyperbole now carries the weight of lived trauma, from the attack on former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, to the shooting at a congressional baseball practice, to the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Every lawmaker now speaks from a place shaped by experience. This is why Senator Alyssa Slotkin's response, asserting that courage is contagious, resonates as more than a political slogan. Slotkin is a former CIA officer trained to navigate security risk with composure. Her refusal to be silenced reflects a broader anxiety inside Congress, a belief that political language can quickly manifest into real-world consequences. Democratic leaders argue that President Trump's framing, positioning these 6 lawmakers as traitors, crosses a dangerous threshold. While criticism is expected in politics, invoking treason elevates a disagreement into an accusation of disloyalty to the nation. The historical weight of the word is enormous. It suggests betrayal, conspiracy, and mortal danger. And when combined with reposts calling for execution, the effect is amplified. Republican allies of the president, however, frame the criticism differently. They argue that the lawmakers initiated the escalation by implying the president might give illegal orders. In their view, this undercuts the unity of the military, which depends on trust in the commander-in-chief. They see the video as a political maneuver disguised as a constitutional reminder. This conflict reveals something deeper, the erosion of shared assumptions about institutional legitimacy. When one side believes it is defending constitutional order and the other believes it is defending the integrity of the presidency, both interpret the moment as existential. From that vantage point, rhetoric becomes not merely expressive but defensive, a way of staking moral claim over the direction of the country. But underneath the public exchanges, a quieter reality persists. Law enforcement officials monitor threats. Staff members calculate risk. Families of lawmakers worry. The line between political theater and physical danger grows thinner each year, and the normalization of violent metaphors only accelerates that progression. For the American public, this raises a fundamental question: how much danger should elected officials be expected to endure? Democracy requires disagreement, even passionate conflict. But it cannot function when debates between elected leaders routinely become a matter of personal security. The challenge now is not simply defusing a single controversy, but rebuilding the norms that once kept political differences constrained within peaceful boundaries.
I have never seen a president or heard of a president who has done more to encourage political violence. I have asked the Capitol Police to give special protection and keep an eye on Slotkin and Kelly as well, because you got to worry after the president says these things.
Have you gotten any specific threats, sir?
Not that I'm aware of.
This moment does not exist in isolation. It is part of a broader landscape where political institutions are under unprecedented strain. The Justice Department is simultaneously assessing threats against lawmakers while also reviewing the conduct of investigators in unrelated probes. State legislatures report increases in harassment. Governors speak openly about threats targeting their families. The sense of volatility is national, not localized. In this environment, the president's words carry added weight. President Donald Trump remains one of the most influential political figures in the country, commanding a deeply loyal base. His statements shape public perception instantly, not only through direct communication, but through the cascading amplification of millions of followers. When he labels lawmakers as traitors, the term takes on a life of its own across online communities predisposed to distrust government institutions. At the same time, the president's critics often face accusations of weaponizing legal processes against political opponents. The investigation into Senator Adam Schiff and the DOJ's reported interest in how that investigation is being conducted feeds into broader debates over politicization of law enforcement. Supporters of the president argue that scrutiny of Schiff is long overdue. Critics see potential retaliation. Both narratives coexist, further eroding public consensus. What makes the moment particularly delicate is that multiple institutional pressures overlap. Escalating threats against lawmakers' investigations into investigators, disputes over military loyalty, partisan debates over legal authority, amplified rhetoric at the highest levels of power. Each of these alone would test democratic stability. Together, they reflect a political system navigating sustained turbulence. The question becomes, what is the path forward? Some analysts argue that stronger guardrails, both legal and rhetorical, are needed. Clearer standards for presidential speech, reinforced norms around political disagreement, more robust protection for elected officials. Others warn against overcorrecting, arguing that limiting political expression would set its own dangerous precedent. Yet most observers agree that the country is entering an era where personal security, political language, and institutional trust are inseparable. Every presidential statement now carries implications not only for public debate, but for the safety of those involved. Every congressional video, even those reiterating established legal doctrine, is interpreted through the lens of contemporary polarization. The stakes are not abstract. They shape how Americans view their leaders, their military, and their own role in civic life. And the institutions meant to stabilize the system, courts, law enforcement, the press, the military, are increasingly drawn into partisan conflict. What remains to be seen is whether the country can reclaim a shared understanding of political accountability without allowing rhetorical battles to escalate into violence or instability. This is why Senator Alyssa Slotkin's response, asserting that courage is contagious, resonates as more than a political slogan. Slotkin is a former CIA officer trained to navigate security risk with composure. Her refusal to be silenced reflects a broader anxiety inside Congress, a belief that political language can quickly manifest into real-world consequences. Democratic leaders argue that President Trump's framing, positioning these 6 lawmakers as traitors, crosses a dangerous threshold. While criticism is expected in politics, invoking treason elevates a disagreement into an accusation of disloyalty to the nation. The historical weight of the word is enormous. It suggests betrayal, conspiracy, and mortal danger, and when combined with reposts calling for execution, the effect is amplified. Republican allies of the president, however, frame the criticism differently. They argue that the lawmakers initiated the escalation by implying the president might give illegal orders. In their view, this undercuts the unity of the military, which depends on trust in the commander-in-chief. They see the video as a political maneuver disguised as a constitutional reminder. This conflict reveals something deeper: the erosion of shared assumptions about institutional legitimacy. When one side believes it is defending constitutional order and the other believes it is defending the integrity of the presidency, both interpret the moment as existential. From that vantage point, rhetoric becomes not merely expressive, but defensive, a way of staking moral claim over the direction of the country. But underneath the public exchanges, a quieter reality persists. Law enforcement officials monitor threats. Staff members calculate risk. Families of lawmakers worry. The line between political theater and physical danger grows thinner each year, and the normalization of violent metaphors only accelerates that progression. For the American public, this raises a fundamental question. How much danger should elected officials be expected to endure? Democracy requires disagreement, even passionate conflict. But it cannot function when debates between elected leaders routinely become a matter of personal security. The challenge now is not simply defusing a single controversy, but rebuilding the norms that once kept political differences constrained within peaceful boundaries.